tonight's show. We're going to have readings of new novels, books, poetry by three wonderful writers from the Red Earth MFA program. I've been lucky to read a bunch of, I think I've read 10 to 15 books, a lot of novels, a lot of poetry from the MFA program, and I've been very lucky to do that. And I even got to interview one of the MFA grads who has a new book out, and that was fun. And if you don't mind me saying, that's going to be reviewed tomorrow, right, in the New York Times?
It was reviewed already.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay,
But it will be in the Sunday Times, yes.
But it'll be in tomorrow's
print,
paper,
yes,
right?
print, yes.
Anyway, without further ado, Rob?
All right. Well, I first want to thank Zach. Where's Zach? Is Zach still there? Zach, thank you. And his, what's your website, Zach?
You can find me on Spotify under Pretty Well.
Pretty well. All right, thank you. That was awesome. So I just want to welcome you all, and thanks to Literati and James. This is a beautiful bookstore. Please buy some books on our way out, right? This is a beautiful, beautiful bookstore. We're very lucky to be here. And now let's get to our wonderful readers. We're really amazed, and it's just totally awesome to be back together. At least for me, this is the first big thing. And so our first writer is going to be Paul Juhasz. Where are you, Paul? Are you here? Okay. Here's a little bit about Paul. Living what could be charitably called a nomadic life, Paul was born in Western New Jersey, grew up just outside New Haven, Connecticut, had spent appreciable chunks of time of his life in the plains of central Illinois, in the upper hill country of Texas, and in the Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania. Most recently seduced by the spirit of the Red Earth, ooh la la, he now lives in Oklahoma City. He has worked at an Amazon fulfillment center, manned a junk truck, and driven for Uber, material he's drawn on for his poetry, fiction, and creative nonfiction. He has read at dozens of conferences and festivals across the country, including Scissortail and the Woody Guthrie Festival. His work has appeared in Bio Stories, Red River Review, Red Earth Review, Voices de la Luna, Windward Review, Oklahoma Review, Dragon Poet Review, Tescovito, Concho River Review, Insurrection Anthology, Ain't Gonna Be Treated This Way, Speak Your Mind, and Bull Buffalo and Indian Paintbrush, The Poetry of Oklahoma. His first book, which I think we'll hear from tonight, Fulfillment Diary of a Warehouse Picker, was published by Fine Dog Press in July 2020. So, Paul.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. This is weird to sit down here. I feel like I'm telling you a really fucked up bedtime story.
You are?
Well, I guess I kind of am. I'll be reading from Fulfillment, as Rob said, Diary of a Warehouse Picker. For legal reasons, I can't divulge the company, but I think we all know the company. And it's a place that I refer to as a kind of a one part Blade Runner, one part Monty Python, and one part Lord of the Flies. Just a place of impossible people, impossible products, and intense dehumanization of workers. So I'm going to read the epigraph, and then I'm going to read a handful of passages jumping around and give you a kind of a flavor. And the epigraph comes from John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath. And they go nuts, and you see them and hear them, and pretty soon you don't know if you're nuts or not. When they get to screaming in the night, sometimes you think it's you doing the screaming. And sometimes it is. So we'll start with one of the characters I talk a lot about is a guy named Matt. Matt was a really interesting kind of worker. No one wanted to talk to Matt. In fact, they went to great lengths to avoid Matt. He was kind of a really frustratingly unclued in person, and for some reason he took a shine to me. So he's a recurring character, but that you'll hear some tonight. But here's what a sample conversation with Matt is like. Matt, do you like the G.I. Joe movies? Me, haven't seen them. Which one's your favorite? I haven't seen any of them. Did you see the latest one? Is this thing on? No, I haven't. I cannot believe they killed off Duke. Why would they do that? I pondered politely, reminding him that I just said I didn't see the movie. Instead, because I'm a dumbass, I respond, I don't know, maybe the writers thought they had exhausted the depth of the character and there was really nowhere else to go with them. Huh? I sigh and then give Matt the reply I know he wants. Man, Cobra is just fucking evil. Matt shakes his head knowingly. I know, man. I know. Fist bump. Day 23. Can there really be such a thing as the essential Michael Bolton? Day 31. I mentioned to Mike, who's my manager, that walking the standard 15 to 18 miles per night, encased in the ejaculation of a consumer world gone mad like I'm a human mosquito, would suck slightly less if we could listen to some music on an iPod or something. He replied, we can't, because the company sells iPods, and there would be no way for security to know if the ones we had were truly ours or stolen from the warehouse. I thought about this for a moment. Then I mentioned the company also sells pants. And so to make life more bearable to security, I would volunteer to stop wearing any from now on. He didn't say anything, he just looked at me for a moment or two, then turned and walked away. I don't think he likes me very much. Day 39. Why does the never-ending story have a running time of 102 minutes? There's another character named Brad. Brad was a man of profound perversity. I'm not positive he was a human being. I think he might have been just a goat that learned to walk upright. So you'll hear a few passages with Brad, and this is the first. Day 49. I just passed Brad. He was holding a DVD of a film creatively titled Big Titty MILFs number 22. As I was walking by, he pointed at the accomplished actress on the cover, sighed longingly, and said, reminds me of Mother. I have no words, truly none, except this place sucks. Day 57. This place is not only ridiculous, but it is also dangerous and potentially lethal. And tonight my time is almost up. As I grabbed an item from a top bin, one, then two pairs of women's pajamas fell on my head. My reflexes momentarily dulled by the successive blows. I was unable to avoid the avalanche of dozens more pajamas. Soon I was prone on the floor, buried in an ever-growing pile of satin. My final thoughts before the darkness took me were, no, dear Lord, not like this. It can't end like this. Not like Grandpa. Day 64. The enforced isolation of this place does lend a certain clarity of thought. For example, today I pondered the oddness of expectant parents who, when asked if they have a gender preference, say they just hope the baby has 10 fingers and 10 toes. I would have thought they'd be more concerned it had a head. Day 79, Matt again. I'm wearing shorts in late November, as I frequently do. Matt points at my exposed legs. What do you think it is, summer? I give my standard answer to comments like this. I'm part Viking. His eyes get wide. Dude, you don't even have an accent. I walk away looking for someone to hug me and tell me it'll be okay. Day 80. I always find the phrase I just threw up in my mouth to be silly and needlessly redundant. Unless I've been doing it wrong all of these years, every time I throw up, I do it in my mouth. This is the type of mental clarity is the best this place has to offer. Day 88. Tonight I pass a bag of Chef Michael's gourmet dog food, and it got me thinking, just how bad do you need to fuck up in culinary school before they assign you to the dog food division? Day 90. I pass that bag of gourmet dog food again, and as this long night progresses, I find myself thinking more about the tragedy that is Chef Michael. How fulfilling can it be for him, I think to myself, to express his love for food preparation, for a consumer that spends 4 to 6 hours on average licking its own ass. Cry for Chef Michael. Cry for us all. Day 105, Brad, Soto Voce. Hey, do you ever get a chance to pick a sex toy? Me, since during an average shift I pick about a dozen. Stay classy, America. Yeah, why? Do you ever touch them? You know, feel them. Well, considering the normal performance of a picker's job involves physically picking up an item and physically placing it in a tote, I think such manual interactions are unavoidable. Huh? Yes, Brad, I touched them to get them in the tote. Brad furtively looks around to be sure there is no one to overhear us. Then, sometimes I like to sneak them into the bathrooms and use them. This is a true story, by the way. I wish it wasn't, but it is. You know, try them out, so I know if they're worth buying. Other than taking a mental note to warn all my friends, family, and associates that if they were planning on buying a loved one a sex toy for Christmas, and really what says deck the halls more than a Jeff Stryker 10-inch dildo with a suction cup base, then perhaps they should do their shopping elsewhere. I didn't know what else to do or say with this piece of unsolicited information, except throw up a little in my mouth. Day 119. A few minutes before the shift begins, Matt was sitting in the break area, watching highlights of the Baltimore Ravens' victory over the Steelers earlier today. As ESPN showed the Pittsburgh sideline, Matt began to chant, "Overrated." Knowing I was courting madness, I mentioned that I found this a bizarre chant. It doesn't make any sense. Well, Matt countered, it does, because Pittsburgh is overrated. Yes, but your evidence of that fact is that your team can beat them. The chant really says, you must not be as good as everyone thought if we can beat you. I think a more appropriate chant would be, we're slightly better. Matt was silent for a moment. Fool that I was, I thought I made a real breakthrough. But then, yeah, well, Pittsburgh can go suck it, because we beat those overrated chumps. I washed my hands of the man. Day 130. Tonight, Mike sent me to do paper picks. A paper pick is when a box is packed but is missing one item, either damaged or overlooked. So they write the location down on paper and send a runner to the mods to get it and rush it back to the packer. I'll get to do this for 12 hours. After he explains it to me, I say, so I'm basically playing fetch, like a dog. Yeah, I guess you could look at it that way. Do I get treats? What? Treats, like dogs and dolphins do. Anchovies, or biscuits. I prefer anchovies, but dog biscuits could work, just not the green ones, those suck. Rubbing his face with his hands, he replied, no, Paul, you do not get treats, just do it. But dolphins get treats. We don't use dolphins for this. We use people, like you. I'm not surprised. Dolphins wouldn't work under these no-treat conditions. Just get to work, Paul. I turned to go, but then I was struck by another thought. Would you at least rub my belly when I return with a pick? The hell are you talking about? Mike shouted. He's been doing this a lot lately. I think it must be peak season stress. Come on, I'll do the leg thing. Paul, go! Pat my head, maybe? Just get to work. This place sucks. I don't think he likes me very much. Day 132. I think it's awesome that one can buy gift cards from the company from other stores, like GameStop or Applebee's. Because there's nothing like being too lazy to shop when you're already being too lazy to shop. Wasn't it? 153. Today Mike told me during stand-up I was to go upstairs and wrangle totes. I assumed he selected me because he learned I'd spent 10 years living in Texas, and not because tote wrangling is widely considered the worst job there is in the warehouse. I dutifully went upstairs once the shift began, but returned to Mike's desk about 5 minutes later. I have no idea where the horses are kept, I informed him. What? The horses, to wrangle the totes from. Oh, very cute, Paul, he said in a tone that may have been condescending. We don't use horses. Oh, so we do it standing on the ground? Yes, Paul, we do. in a tone that I'm sure was condescending. Good, because I left my chaps at home. I was nervous about chafing. And back upstairs I went. About 10 minutes later, Mike came upstairs to find me walking around somewhat lost and confused. "Paul," he shouted, "what in the hell are you doing?" "I can't find the damn lassos anywhere," I screamed in frustration. "Jesus Christ, Paul, just forget it. I'll get someone else to do it." And just like that, my rodeo career was over. Day 164. For me, being sent to the East Mod or the West Mod is of little concern, akin to choosing death by boredom or death by fatigue. But for Brad, I realized this is a question of some legitimate angst. For all the good porn is in the East Mod, but the majority of the sex toys are in the West. So, this place has taught me empathy, and I'm the richer for it. Day 168, I had a dream the other day that I walked into an aisle and saw Brad swinging a double-sided dildo over his head like it was a phallic lasso, screaming, "It's girth that matters." But then I realized this wasn't a dream. It was just Tuesday. Day 172, I decided it was time to try to make up to Mike. Knowing he has a thing for damaging out items, I brought to his desk a box of hair dye and said I thought it should be damaged out. He did the required 6-sided check, then said, "Paul, I don't see a problem." I said, "It's right here," pointing at the issue and beaming my best "I'm a good worker" smile at him. He tried again and was still flummoxed, so I had to explain. "It says here on the box that this is semi-permanent hair coloring." Yeah? Well, as I'm sure you know, permanent means remaining unchanged indefinitely. There aren't degrees of permanent. Permanent is permanent, so there can be no such state as semi-permanent. Therefore, this product is logically as well as semantically damaged. I gave him the smile again for good measure. He rubbed his face with his hands, which I noticed he does a lot. He says, "Paul, just get back to work." I glanced back as I turned the corner into the mod and saw him face down on the desk with his hands folded over his head. He may have been crying. The last three. Day 177, there's a girl, Carla, who finds Matt's existence particularly offensive. Any conversation with her quickly descends into an anti-Matt polemic. Tonight, in the midst of a typical rant, she asked me, "Why do you even talk to him?" In all honesty, I had never really thought about it before. After a few moments' consideration, I answered, "I guess because I understand him." What's that supposed to mean? It means I get it. The reason Matt shamelessly bandwagons his sports teams, the reason he simply assumes everyone is interested in his stories, the reason he is so obnoxious is, I think, the same reason Mabel hands out lollipops and Stovepipe Lincoln chants the Gettysburg Address. And come to think of it, the reason why I harass Mike. It's a declaration of identity, a way to scream into the faceless machinery of this place, I exist. I'm not just a number on your rate chart. I don't think she bought it, but I think I'm onto something here. Most of the aberrant behavior here, with the exception of Brad, he's just a twisted fuck, could be a desperate assertion of self to a persistently depersonalized world. It's depressing, yes, and dysfunctional, but not without its own perverse beauty. Rumor has it, Mike returns from his sabbatical tomorrow. I'm looking forward to it. Day 178, I present Mike with a DVD of The Karate Kid, and I inform him this needs to be damaged out. Why? What's wrong with it? Ralph Macchio's in it. And I'll end with day 179. Today, Matt asked me which mod I preferred. I found this to be a question of profound existential absurdity. It's like being asked which caliber bullet you'd like to be shot in the head with. "Matt," I answered, "I am thoroughly ambivalent." His eyes grew wide. "Like a frog?" I hate this fucking place. Thank you.
All right, great stuff, awesome. So I forgot to mention, Paul and Hank both have books they brought of their own for sale. So if you want to purchase their books, they have them. You can just catch them. They'll sign them for you. And Heather's book, I believe it's not out yet, but she will.
Tuesday.
You can buy it and she'll sign it here. Is
Yeah,
that right?
I will sign it tonight, and you can pick it up on Tuesday.
Great. Okay, so next is Hank Jones. Hank Jones considers Texas and New Mexico the birthplaces of his parents to be as close to home as he knows, growing up as he did in the wake of his father's military career. After finishing a master's in English at Tarleton State University, he taught for 2 years in Japan, then put a backpack on and traveled in various parts of the world until his money ran out. At that point, he got a job at his alma mater and has been teaching English there for 20 years, with a 4-year stint as assistant director in the international office. He received an MFA from OCU in January 2019 and enjoyed the Oklahoma poetry scene so much that he and his wife now live in a house off Keystone Lake outside of Tulsa. His poetry has been published in Cyber Soleil, a literary journal, Voices de la Luna, Dragon Poet Review, the Concho River Review, and Red River Review. He's also contributed poems to the Great American Wise Ass Poetry Anthology from Lamar University Literary Press, Speak Your Mind, Poems of Protest and Resistance, published by Village Books Press, the Stone Renga Anthology from Tail Feathers Press, and most recently Bull Buffalo and Indian Paintbrush, The Poetry of Oklahoma, edited by Ron Wallace. Hank Jones.
I'm going to try to sit down like Paul, but I don't know if that's going to work. I'll try. It's a little less scary sitting down, actually. Thank you, Rob, for putting this together, and thanks for this wonderful bookshop. Thank all of you for being here. It's very cool. I'm very nervous because I've been quarantined for 15 months and I'm not used to being out in the world. It's very strange. Ken Hayda said I should start with this one, so I'm just going to do what he says because he's Ken Hayda. Before I die. I hope before I die that I meet a cellist, a very fine cellist, who loves more than anything to sit for hours and play box cello suites, who has played the art of the fugue countless times, loves to play Beethoven's late string quartets, forgets to eat or sleep, this person so consumed by the need to draw bow across strings, fingering sounds into notes of perfection. I want to meet this person, want to become great friends with them, so great that when it comes time for me to die, they will offer to come by my bedside, play Bach and Beethoven until my soul slips away from my body, drifts away with the somber sounds. I'll give you the title poem. The title of my book is Too Late for Manly Hands, and this is where that comes from. I look at the fingers holding this page and I realize these are the hands I'll die with. I always wanted the hands of working men, carpenters and cowboys, plumbers and stonemasons, rugged, brown, covered with tiny white scars, capable of handling tools requiring strength, hammers, lassos, wrenches. My father's hands, my grandfather's, men raised on farms and ranches, men capable of wielding mighty tools. I watched my father hammer steel posts with a sledgehammer deep into the earth while I held the steel beam cowering, as he reared back with each mighty swing and brought the hammer down perfectly every time. Always certain one day he'd miss and drive the hammer into my too soft head, Abraham needlessly killing Isaac while God looked on promising nothing. The work of reading and grading that I do now does nothing to challenge my hands. I think of Seamus Heaney and his pen and know that his poem was really about shame. Shame that he was not the man his fathers were, just a poet, weakened by the need to sit inside and read and write, doing what has to be done. But something in us rebels, rails angrily against the choices we have made, demands that we head outdoors and prove our manhood in the old ways of righteous labor. And though we know this thinking is wrong, that the world does not respond to or take note of its laborers, that if we want to make a difference, it will be words and words alone that will get us heard. Still, it doesn't sit right somehow, and my hands stand an accusation against me. This one's for Paul. What I learned in Boy Scouts Well, there was the time the scout from Spain told us how to fuck a cat, giving us a visual as his hands pretended to hold 2 back legs as he pulled the yowling creature onto his stiff adolescent prick. And he just told us about it, okay, folks? He just told us about it. Or the time the scout from England showed us what an uncircumcised penis looked like, its hooded glory in marked contrast to our German helmets. Or the dirty jokes told around the campfire late at night after the adults had gone to bed, with punchlines like ding dong, damn it, ding dong, and shh, they about to land. Or how to put a fire out by pissing on it, giant white plume rising into the night sky, smell of ammoniac embers burning the nose, strange disinclination to cook over said fire the morning after. But also how to build a fire with no more than 2 matches, how to tie knots like an old-time sailor, how to lash poles together to build towers and, at least in theory, a bridge, how to put up and break down camp, how to pack 40 pounds in a pack and carry it entire days, living mostly on only what you can carry on your back. Or canoeing for days down a filthy river with nasty white foam washing off the farm fields we passed, ensuring we paddled our canoes carefully so as not to end up next to it. Or how to sleep under a billion stars, the shy Milky Way standing out clearly to my eyes away from city lights for the first time. Or the total silence of a forest night with no human noise except the tiny bit we brought. So kind of a mixed bag. In the Buddha's belly. This is another Boy Scout rule, but a more positive one perhaps. I'd taken a handful of Boy Scouts on a hike, following trails pounded by thousands of feet past ancient trees, never quite sure the path we were on would get us there. But we arrived at the temple in Kamakura, stood in awe of the giant Buddha in his greenish tint from his 500 years in Japanese reigns. I walked inside the Buddha, the boys behind. Having read a few books on Zen, I knelt and began to breathe in and out from the diaphragm. No one else was in there, just me and a few boys whom I'd forgotten about. When it came back to my mind that I was responsible for these young lives following me about in a strange country, I opened my eyes with a start and found them all kneeling in the same posture as me, faces forward, breathing slowly, perfectly at peace in the Buddha's belly. This is for my friends and family down in Texas. Zen versus a Texas summer. 19, freshly heartbroken, weary of the human world, and seeking a deeper mystical understanding of the universe. I formed a vague desire to be one with nature. Dressing as close to naked as I could manage, wearing only tank top, short shorts, flip-flops, I drove out to our leased ranch, a few stringy cows grazing, down a faded dirt road till the road disappeared, then walked till I couldn't see my car anymore, couldn't hear anything but bird song and cow grunt. I found a cedar tree to sit under in the dirt, pulled out Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance, and tried to get lost in philosophical journeying. The sweat began dripping in my eyes almost immediately as 1,000 cicadas resumed their unholy screech. A horsefly buzzed looking for purchase on my exposed soft skin. A pesky mosquito droned in my damp ear, and a fire ant crawled up my leg and bit me. I realized in an instant of enlightenment the futility of contemplation in a Texas summer as mind succumbed to flesh, flesh to nature. Thanks to Tim Bradford for improving that one significantly. Thanks for your help. For the entire collection, actually. Be a cannibal for the Lord. This is a story told to me by Joy Brown, and I shamelessly stole it. So you should be careful with your stories around writers. The wife was away, and I passed the time dolorous before the TV when my dog sat on the remote and discovered a televangelist. As I reached to change the channel, I was struck by something the slick-haired man said. "You must," he said, "be a cannibal for the Lord." And I was stunned as I released the control and flopped back on the couch, pondering these bizarre and shocking words. We must be cannibals for the Lord. Yes, I thought, rather than smugly, glibly, apathetically just eating and drinking our Lord, this man was saying we must eat each other. Or maybe that wasn't what he was saying, but I struggled with this fascinating new angle on religion, wondered briefly how on earth it would bring in any money for Reverend Slick standing there, but in love with the metaphorical possibilities. And that's where I was when the wife returned, a look of shock and horror on her face at which she caught me watching as I blushed as if caught masturbating. I quickly explained what Reverend Slick had said, saw her step back in confusion and mild glimmering interest. Then we both turned to the screen as the preacher said again, this time more clearly, "You must all be accountable to the Lord." And my heart fell, and my wife smirked as I realized that this dude wasn't saying anything new, just the usual shit. Thanks to Joey. A rash of children. I'm sitting in the doctor's office lobby, childless but surrounded by children, a rash erupting in vague patches everywhere on my body. If I had kids, we'd all be here today after a weekend on the river, my children inheritors of my propensity to break out in a rash if I look at poison ivy. Almost 50, I've probably denied myself the knowledge of procreating and reproducing tiny versions of myself to run around in circles at my feet. My friend Walter, unmarried, no children, told me once about an affair with a beautiful married Korean student who became pregnant with his child and had to have an abortion before she could return to her home country to her waiting unaware husband. Walter died a few years after this, leaving almost nothing behind. I wonder if in that realm he now resides, he regrets there's not a child here who bears some trace of him. I wonder if I'll regret someday my own choice not to have children. Right now, as I sit here itching, waiting to be squeezed in, I think I'd rather have my poison ivy rash, which at least can be cured and will only trouble me a short while. This one is one that my friend Colin has told me was his favorite poem. I don't know if it's still his favorite poem, but I'll read it for Colin. Noise. I step out on my porch at 7 a.m. Excuse me. I step out on my porch at 7 a.m. The vehicular buzz already heavy in the air. I, listening more carefully, hear the subtle movement of wind through leaves stiffening with autumn cold. I ponder briefly that I may never know what a world without human noise sounds like. I wonder briefly that some children today may forget there's an earth outside more interesting than what's staring, blaring from the screen in front of them. The artificial glow on their faces combined with the artificial noise in their ears, creating a kind of enchanted, painless bubble inside of which they'll float probably their whole lives. And the earth will have to lash them with hurricanes, burn them with wildfires, shake them with quakes, to wake them up and remind them the earth was here first and will remain here long after it has rid itself of this noisome humanity. I need to update that and add pandemic in there, right? I need to put a pandemic in there. Kill them off with a pandemic. Just a couple of more, I think. Are you okay for the long one? I mean, it's a page and a half, and then one shorter one. Is that cool? Okay. Reading The Old Man and the Sea at 50. So I've been past 50 at some point. It happens. I finished reading The Old Man and the Sea with my students, a book I last read over 20 years ago. I didn't cry at the end when I first read it at 29. I didn't cry at the end when I first read it at 16, but I cried this time. Perhaps because at 50 I understand Santiago's suffering so much more viscerally. I understand now how the body breaks down, the knees, the shoulder, the heels of the feet. In the book, Santiago reads about his hero DiMaggio, reads about the heel spurs, but can't understand what that means, at least the words. He asks, what is a spur of the heel? But even though the medical knowledge escapes him, he understands deep, profound, crippling pain and the need to work through it anyway. I cry at the end when Madeline finds the old man asleep in his hut, broken by his ordeal, the boy who has fished with Santiago since he was 5, whose parents forbid him to fish with him now because Santiago is unlucky. I cry with Madeline, and like him, I don't know why I cry. Something to do with understanding how much the old man has suffered, something to do with how much we love this old man, who despite everything that the sea can throw at him, endures. Santiago said to himself while out at sea, with a half-eaten marlin 18 feet long strapped to his boat, sharks circling to take what's left, he said, a man can be destroyed but not defeated. I never understood those words when I was younger. I ask my students what they mean, and they stare at me waiting for the answer. I tell them about Cool Hand Luke fighting Dragline, a man a head taller than him, 100 pounds heavier, beating Luke to a pulp. How Luke gets knocked down again and again, but always, every time he gets back up till finally Dragline gives up, walks away, everyone walks away, and Luke just stands there swaying, turning in circles, moving so he won't fall down. I say Luke was destroyed by Dragline, but he was not defeated. He lost the fight, but he won the love of every man who watched him refuse to stay down. I say Santiago refused to stay down. He lost almost everything, bringing in the skeletal remains of a marlin bigger than anyone had ever seen, but he did not lose himself. He will sleep, he will heal, and in a few days he will go fishing again, this time with Madeline, who is almost a man now, and will no longer listen to his parents who care only about luck. He will follow this man, and he will learn how to be a great fisherman, and he will learn how to always get up again, no matter what, until he's dead. I read this now at 50, with more of my life behind me than in front, and I know only one thing. I will always get back up again until I can no longer rise, because I am dead. And I'll end on this one. If you put the words together just right. Because if you put the words together just right, I'll weep, tears coming down my face in uncontrollable streams, or I'll laugh harder than I've ever laughed before, with a different kind of tears running down my face. If you put the words together right, you can make someone believe in God, or you can make them turn on God forever, or make a convincing case that whether there is or isn't a God, it hardly matters. If you can put the words together right, all worlds are possible. Those real, those fantasy, those before time, and those after times but move beyond. If you can put the words together right, magic becomes real, and the only place magic has ever existed, in the imagination, and the words necessary to make it live, breathe, take on flesh and blood. If you put the words together right, then you understand why the Word was first, and how the Word became flesh and lived amongst us. Nothing to do with divinity or miracles, everything to do with the power of words, put in the right place, and then all things become possible, even resurrection, even life after death. Thank you.
A poet in grad school would always take a picture of the audience, so I'm going to do that. All right, our final reader of the night is Heather Levy. Heather Levy is a born and bred Oklahoman and graduate of Oklahoma City University's Redditor MFA program for creative writing. Her work has appeared in numerous journals, including Nailed magazine, Crab Fat magazine, Prick of the Spindle, and Dragon Poet Review. The LA Times recently featured her debut, Walking Through Needles, calling it a standout for its frank but sensitive exploration of trauma and desire. And the New York Times had a lot of great things to say about it too, as you may have seen. So, Heather.
Thank you, Rob. I'm not used to sitting and reading, but I've been standing up back there, so I'm going to sit. So hopefully you guys can all hear okay. I'll try to read as loud as possible. So I'm actually, I am of course going to be reading from Walking Through Needles, which is available here actually right now for signing. You won't be able to pick it up until Tuesday, but it's here. So if you want a personally signed copy. I'm going to be reading a few chapters into the book, and normally I have two main protagonists, Sam and Eric. They are step siblings who were very close. Sam being a girl, okay, but they were very close as teenagers, and all you need to know going into the scene is something very traumatic had happened to them in their teen years that kind of sent them off spinning in different directions, and they're brought together whenever Eric's father, his truck is found, basically, so he's missing, and so there's an investigation into what's going on with him. Okay, so there were many building supply stores in Oklahoma City, but Eric always found himself driving the 40 minutes south to Blanchard when he had a new remodeling job. Oh, I'm sorry, I should say, this is 15 years later. Sorry, 15 years later, okay? So they're adults now. The building supply there was reasonable, but that's not why he went. Today, like most days when he drove out to Blanchard, he cruised down County Line Road, 9-inch nails or tool blasting. He drove down a packed dirt lane leading to a small acreage, to the place where Sam grew up. The current owners had torn down the 2-story white farmhouse, built a brown brick single-story home in its place. Eric wanted to scream and cry the first time he saw the new house, and he did allow himself some tears once he saw that they had kept the old red barn. They painted it white, but he saw that the inside was remarkably the same. How many times had he snuck onto the property since that first time? Probably dozens. Each time Eric told himself it would be the last, that it was wrong and dangerous to trespass, but being there helped him feel whole again. 2 years and the owners still hadn't worked the land, and Eric wondered why the hell they bought it. There were 20 or so chickens in a poorly made coop, and the owners had a thin dairy cow he usually saw inside the barn instead of out grazing the fields. He parked at least 100 yards from the beginning of the dirt road and walked to the property, red dust billowing in clouds behind him. He made sure no one was around and crept past the new house to the barn. The mid-afternoon sun made the whitewash appear to glow, reminding him of the church Jerry had forced him to attend, how the Sunday morning sun reached its fingers out from the sides of the building. Each time he approached the barn, his heart sped up with the thought that Sam would be there waiting for him when he entered. The disappointment of knowing he was alone dragged his stomach down to his feet until he felt like he was tripping over memories of her. He entered the barn, the cow acknowledging him with a low moo. The wooden ladder leading up to the loft was splintery but solid, and Eric slowly climbed, feeling the ache in his damaged left leg with each rung. There wasn't much space at the top, and he had to crouch over to the corner of the loft where he used to sneak away with Sam, talking and making out on the hay for hours. He had never been with anyone like he was with her, without any thought about time. He kneeled down and crawled to the space just under the large hinged window. It was closed, trapping the summer heat inside the barn. Eric rolled his eyes. The new owners had no idea what they were doing. He was tempted to lift the window, let in some air for the cow, but instead he ran his hand down the wall until his fingers found grooves in the weathered oak. His fingertips traced the carved heart, the E and S inside, and he was back where he wanted to be, where he needed to be. "How often do you come here?" a woman's voice called from below. Shit. He thought he had been careful, parking his truck well outside of the property. There was no good explanation for him being there, but for the truth. It had been his home once, no matter how short a time. He stooped back to the ladder and looked over, expecting to see an angry homeowner. It was as if a hard wind blew him back, knocking him on his ass. He quickly recovered and looked over the ladder again. Sam peered up at him, her face set in an expression he could study for 1,000 years and never know the meaning of. She stood erect and tense, like she was about to change her mind and run off. I'm sorry, I should say, this is the first time they're seeing each other face to face in 15 years. She wore a pale gray V-neck shirt, tight blue jeans hugging her curves. Her long dark hair was down and parted in the middle, and a simple gold necklace rested above her breast. She was more beautiful than he remembered. "Barn cat got your tongue?" she said. "No, I didn't expect you here." "Well, I am." He felt silly trying to talk from the loft, so he climbed down the ladder, the pain in his calf increasing by the minute. He was glad he was wearing one of his nicer plaid button-up shirts with good clean boots, but he didn't shave that morning and now regretted his laziness. When he reached the ground, he wasn't sure what to do. It had been a week since he saw her at the bank, and he figured ever speaking with her again was a lost cause. He had so many questions he wanted to ask her, namely why she decided to see him now. He tried to act casual by leaning against the ladder. Really, he wanted to sit somewhere to get pressure off his left leg before it gave out on him. "Still bothers you, huh?" Sam said, eyeing his calf. "Yeah, but it's okay most of the time." He was a good 3 inches taller than her, but Sam seemed to tower over him, her eyes pressing him closer to the ladder. "Did you follow me here? You're not the only one who can stalk people." "I didn't stalk you. I just had to cash a check and there you were." He saw she looked doubtful. "How did you find me?" It wasn't hard. Public records. So she followed him from his house, and he hadn't even noticed her vehicle behind him. He took a tentative step forward and Sam stepped back, crossing her arms. "I can't believe these assholes tore the house down," she said. "Had another 100 years in it, at least." "I know. Phil's gone to dust, too." "It's depressing as hell. Why do you come here?" He didn't know how to explain it to her, how coming to the property felt like coming home. I miss it. It was good land. Still is. You miss the land. There was so much bitterness and hurt in Sam's face. Eric almost broke down in front of her. Then why the hell did you leave? I didn't want to leave. Your mom, I don't know why, but she didn't want me around. She called services and I went into foster care. Sam closed her eyes and exhaled slowly. She looked like Jerry when she had been stressed and about to lose her shit. My mom wouldn't have done that. I would have known. Ask Grandma Halen. She knows all about it. Sam released a sound as if Eric had punched her chest. Grandma, she died a couple of years after you left. Another stroke. Her voice broke and he could see she was fighting tears. Eric closed the gap between them and held Sam. He felt her stiffen in his arms. I'm so sorry, he said, and Sam relaxed a little. He had loved Grandma Halen. She had been kind to him, treated him like family. He owed her so much. I needed you, Eric, and you disappeared. I didn't even know if you were alive until a few years ago. So he was right, and she had blocked him after he liked her Facebook status. He couldn't be angry about it now that he knew why she shut him out. She thought he had abandoned her. He looked down at her sandaled feet. Her toes were painted shiny red, and he wanted to touch them. He imagined someone, a boyfriend or husband, holding those perfectly painted feet, kissing them. The first year in foster care, I wrote letters to you all the time. Sam pulled back from him. I never got any letters from you. He shook his head. I promise I did. None got returned. He imagined Jerry ripping up every letter. Of course she would protect her daughter from him in whatever way she could. At the time, he thought Sam wanted nothing more to do with him. He had never felt so alone in his life, not even after his mom died. What did you write to me? Eric forced himself to look into her eyes, and he thought he saw the old Sam, the young, strong-willed Sam who was too smart for the town where she was born and raised. Stuff about the families I was staying with and my new school, things like that. That's it, she said, disappointment in her voice. No, I wrote about how much I missed you, that I would find a way back to see you. Sam shook her head as if she didn't believe him. He needed her to believe. Well, you didn't come back, she said, and I was okay. His heart sank to the dirt. Why did you follow me here? Sam stepped back from him, her eyes red and lips hardened. A detective came to my work. Eric stared back at her, confused. Police found a white Chevy in the pond, the one off Morgan. Then Eric understood. His father's truck. The detective asked a lot of questions. Questions about you and Isaac. Questions that made me think. It took all his power to ask. What? That something bad happened to him. He saw worry in Sam's eyes, worry for his father, and made his stomach turn. Police already talked to my mom. She hasn't even mentioned it to me. Probably doesn't want to worry me. She shrugged. I told the detective I don't know where you are. Why'd you say that? I have nothing to hide. Sam shot him a fierce look, and he knew what she was thinking. That December day, 15 years ago. Eric didn't want to relive that day. The sound of Bing Crosby singing and the smell of Grandma Halen's freshly baked gingerbread cookies following him to the woods lining the farmhouse. Deep into those woods he walked, his pocket knife ready. Whenever he thought of that day, it was in bursts and white flashes of fear and the sound of Sam crying over his leg gushing blood, her own right hand cut deep, the gray sky dotted black with scattering birds. Eric, we need to find Isaac. He knew what Sam was getting at. His father would never part with this truck. Change the license plate to avoid the police, sure, but not leave it at the bottom of a pond. If the police thought something happened to his father and didn't find him, there'd be questions Eric didn't want to answer. He looked Sam in the eyes, and he knew she didn't want to answer those questions either. He took her hand. Okay. Thank you.
So thank you everybody for coming. That was our reading for this evening. Thank you so much, Literati. So our writers are here. They'll be happy to sign books or sign in the future.